All right, so welcome. We're covering
mentors.
the topic of the power of a business coach and mentor. As I think everyone would agree, having a mentor while you're growing either your business or you're growing in your career in whatever profession you're in is definitely a massive part to at least the speed of success. Does it guarantee success? Absolutely not, and I'm sure we'll learn more about this. But it definitely helps with the speed of learning to get where you want to go. And hopefully today we get to hear from Jeff and Howie, learn a little more about the power of a coach, an advisor, how each one of those sometimes play different roles between a coach and an advisor, and how you find one and how do you hopefully nurture that relationship. So I'll do first quick introductions. We have over here, we have Jeff Silver, co-CEO of Silver Crystal Sports, a company that specializes in manufacturing of professional sports lettering. He spent the last 18 years building a very successful business, which he has recently sold. Then we have Howie Paskowitz, started his real estate career over 20 years ago at the Medallion Corporation, at which point he grew his career to where it is today as a VP of Starlight Investments, one of the largest, or perhaps the largest real estate firm in Canada. So we'll jump in. Maybe we could go one at a time. Jeff, we'll start with you. Can you give a brief, or go over your journey in the business world and how you got into the business world and where either an advisor or coach played a role with you starting your business?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. In 30 seconds or less, so my history or my family, my grandfather was one of the 3 founding partners of Belmont. So there's a connection with Howie and I and the Medallion Group. So my grandfather was one of the founders of Belmont. He had one son, my dad, who he assumed was going to go into his business. My dad had other plans. My grandfather bought him a medical laboratory business, assuming that would flop very quickly, and he ended up working in that business for a very long time, turning it into a very large business. Passed away at a young age. When I graduated school, I assumed I was going into the real estate business. Great. The people who were running it at the time suggested you can't come in here as part of management and think that you're going to walk in and sit in a manager's chair. So either go back to school and get some professional degree, that didn't matter what it was, or we got to find a business that you can cut your teeth on and learn some management skills. So as a young 21-year-old punk, I said, lovely, find me a sports business, assuming they were going to fail miserably, no sports business out there in Toronto that anyone could find, and I'd walk right into the real estate business, sit in the management chair, and write the end of the storybook's fairy tale. Except God had other plans, and my accountant, or the family accountant, who was more than an accountant, who was an advisor, knew a gentleman who had a sports lettering and numbering company who was looking for a business partner and some capitalization, and magically 18 years ago, I found myself as a 21-year-old with a sports business, with a business partner, but in a sports business, not knowing one thing about business, not a lot, well, I knew a lot about sports, but very little about business, and there I was. So I guess from day one, the mentorship or coaching played a big role in charting that path, and that is where I spent my last 18 years until I successfully, along with my business partner, sold the business last month.
First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. And when you think of advisors, I would imagine there's different points in your career that you need different types of advice. It could be either, do I pursue school or do I go after a business? Do I, once you're in business, the best path to grow a successful sports business. So back in the early stages when you were making that initial decision, how did you go about with, where did you go for that advice? Was that something that was in the family, advisors you could talk to? Did you go out there and start knocking on doors? How did you approach that?
Good question. I think the first step is recognizing that you have a problem, or at least that's what they talk to you about in recovery. Not that I've been there, but that's what I've been told. So recognizing that it's important to listen to advice from all over the place, because you know what you know, but there's a lot of things that you don't know, and you can get advice and learn from everybody and anybody out there. So yes, of course, I looked for mentors that understood business skills. I looked for people in the industry that knew the complexity of the sports business and tried to make connections with those people. But ultimately, I'm a constant learner, and I believe that you can learn from everybody and anybody. So that was pretty much the way I just opened my ears and eyes, and anybody who had any piece of advice, I was prepared to take it, and some of it was great and some of it was pretty useless, but it didn't matter. I think you can learn from everywhere and anywhere.
Awesome. Howie, let's jump to you. Let's hear about your start of your business and or your career in real estate and where you saw either advisories or business coach help you.
Sure. So like Jeff said, there's a master plan sometimes we don't know about. I did my MBA in real estate. I wanted to get into real estate, or possibly because my grades weren't good enough to go into management consulting or investment banking like all my other classmates. And someone who I had spoken to put me in touch with someone else, and said, go speak to Kesher Employment Services. And I got very fortunate at the time, so I worked at Medallion for 18 years for the Bleeman family. There might be some of my ex-colleagues here. And that was one of their tzedakahs, and they looked after, or they used the Kesher to help people find jobs. And Nathan Bleeman said, if there's someone that comes through that seems like they'd be a good fit, send them our way. And I was very blessed to end up there. I was there for 18 years. And then I left to Starlight about 7 years ago. I was approached to come work for Starlight. Real estate development, there's not a lot of schools for it. So really, more than anything, it is learning on the job, and it's learning from other people. When I was asked to come today, I thought I would be part of the halacha discussion in the morning. But I do have one thing to say, which is we all know Ezehu Chacham Halomed Mikol Adam, and this idea that you really can learn from other people. And I think in all business, knowing your business is really key, and you never know anything on day one. So I was very fortunate. I guess the irony here is Jeff wasn't allowed to come work for his family business, and instead I ended up there at the offshoot of what was Belmont. But I was very lucky to have, I never had a formal business coach, but whether it was the Bleeman family who had been doing it for a while, or someone who's I'm still in touch with, his name is Rad Vacicevic. He had been doing development far longer than I did, and I worked under him for 17 of the 18 years I was there. And I guess, echoing what Jeff said, you never know when you're going to get that advice or the direction from someone, and I think it's listening to everyone is key. Chances are whatever you're facing, whatever issues or problems have been dealt with by someone else, so why not learn from their mistakes? I met with someone this week who's probably the biggest player in student housing in Canada, and he said, that doesn't mean I know more, it means I've made more mistakes in this space than anyone else. And I think, you speak to people, you meet with people. My current CEO, Daniel Jimmer, said, you never say no to a meeting if there's a chance to meet with someone. It could be helpful, maybe for you, maybe for them, maybe down the road. I think a lot of business is relationships, particularly in real estate. I feel that it is. I think that applies to everything else. So you come across people, if you treat them well, there's a good chance they'll remember that, and then that will play out well in the future. And the opposite is probably true as well. If you do take advantage of someone or not treat them well, it could come back to haunt you. So I think mentorship comes in all forms, and I think it's seeing the opportunity to be mentored by anyone and everyone that you meet, even if it's someone that's been doing it a lot less than you. There's new ideas out there, and it's always good to be open to them. I think as soon as you think you know everything, you're probably asking for trouble.
That's super interesting, what you said about how very often mentorship could be someone doing it even less than you. So just watching a clip from Simon Sinek, he's a famous, I think a business coach, and someone asked him about the topic of finding a mentor. So he said, when you think of a friendship, you don't walk over to someone and say, hey, can you be my friend, right? It doesn't work that way. And some people don't really know how it works. So everyone in their career or in their business, they do need that mentorship in so many different areas. So one of the mentors that he personally had and that he was talking about was this person that was very successful. I think he's a billionaire and ran many businesses. And he turned around to him one day, he says, you're one of my closest friends and mentors. Why do you take the time to talk to me? He says, actually, I consider you one of my mentors. I feel like I'm learning from you, and it's this interesting two-way street. But maybe we go back, and if you think of the different mentors you had, how did you approach it? How should someone approach it? You're not walking over to someone, I don't think, and say, could you be my mentor? So what was the early days when you're trying to build your own personal advisory board, your own personal, let's say, collection of mentors to help you get to where you need to go? How did you guys specifically approach it? So maybe Howard, we'll start with you, and then we'll go with John.
I'll go back with Simon Sinek, whose famous thing is, find your why. And I think, in knowing how people think and talk, or if you ask people to talk about themselves, they'll generally want to open up. So if you ask them to explain what motivates them, it's usually a good way to get them going. And I think it doesn't mean people won't want to give you advice because they want to share advice, but if you can ask them what makes you tick, what is it that you love about what you do and why you do it, I think they'll open up about that. And oftentimes people are just generally good at heart. If they know that you're asking them for genuine reasons, I think they'd be willing to share that with you. And again, it's being open to those conversations. But you have to be willing to listen and take it to heart and then follow up. And I think back to sort of the relationships and the networking, keeping in touch with anyone that's given you some good direction. Don't get this piece of advice and go off with it and make money or be successful with it without going back, thanking them. In fact, this morning I texted this guy, Rad Vucicevic, who was my mentor, and I said, I'm probably going to mention your name a whole bunch of times today. He would never tell you he's my mentor. It was never a formal mentorship. But again, I think it's if you genuinely believe, and I don't know if it's a humility piece, but if you genuinely believe, which I think we all should, that you can learn from everyone, you will be open and receptive to those conversations.
That's awesome. Jeff, how about on your end?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Howie's statement. I think I'm not even sure I knew when I was looking for a mentor or who that mentor was going to be. I think it was really just being open to having as many conversations as possible and kind of trying to develop relationships. And it kind of naturally formed into a mentorship, and sometimes it was hard to figure out whether that person was mentoring me or I was mentoring them, because it was just such a natural relationship and building. And again, if you're prepared to learn from each individual that you meet, then ultimately you will pave the way and find the right people to connect with that will kind of give you what you need and fill in those answers. So I'm not sure that I could offer a lot of insight into strategically how to pick a mentor, because I think all my mentors just kind of grew organically.
And I think at least I see that as a pretty consistent theme. And I'll tell you, when I got started with my business, I probably took the naive approach of no, I'm gonna find someone in my vertical and be like, hi, could you be my mentor? And that never worked. And then looking back 10 years, and thankfully I do have a pretty strong mentors in different areas, I realized there was never a point where I asked it. It was that relationship where it was almost weirdly a two-way street where we're almost helping each other. So kind of organic networking, take every meeting, be open, being curious, always looking to learn, and before you know it, you're talking to the right people that somehow you're helping each other. That's the thing. Awesome. So the topic is actually the power of a mentor and business coach. So I don't know if, a business coach, I think how you said you didn't specifically use one when you were growing your business, but from your understanding, if someone was looking to understand the difference, maybe give a perspective from your perspective, what is an advisor versus what is a business coach, and how do they potentially play different roles? Maybe Jeff will start.
My business partner and I had hired a business coach for about 10 seconds. It was a lovely experience. We paid a significant amount of money thinking that this guy was going to give us all the answers on how to grow our business and fix our business. And one thing you learn very quickly is you know more about your business than any business coach is going to tell you about your business. But what do I think the difference is? I think a business coach is there to point out very specifically things in the business that they believe, whether it's strategic or structural, that will make your business better, or sometimes be a mirror to reflect on specific business skills. Whereas a mentor is more of a life partner, let's call it, and someone who is not just focused on the business pieces of it, but your personality, your strengths, your weaknesses, and ultimately looking at the entire package, and through that potentially giving some advice or feedback on how to improve your business. But it's more than just specific, you know, here's how to improve your balance sheet, here's how to do X, Y, or Z. So that's the way I see the difference, and that's why for me personally, the business coach just didn't take off at all, but mentorship is certainly something that I have found and continue to look for on a daily basis.
Awesome. Howie, you have any perspective there?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, be careful of people that say they're experts and can tell you how to do your business better than you can, and I'm not knocking people that do. You know, oftentimes in stuff we're doing with the development, we have to get reports peer reviewed, and you know, I tell people they're always going to find mistakes in what was submitted. They're not getting paid to say everything is perfect. You know, there's probably great opportunities for professionals to come in and tell you how you can fix your process. I think that's one thing. But in terms of knowing what you do better than you, you know, I don't, you know, be careful who you think is the expert. I think the ability to have these informal conversations is great. I think we probably take for granted something I've learned a lot where I am now, which is really the not Jewish world. And I'm not encouraging drinking, but Kiddush Club and getting together and the sense of community that we have, I think, is very different and not found in other places. And so, you know, you don't have these hierarchical discussions. If you're sitting around at, you know, whatever you're doing on, you know, after davening, of course, at Kiddush, you know, you're not, oh, you're a president, I can't talk to you, you're on a higher level. Like, these conversations are big, and I think in terms of the formal coaching, there's for sure a role for it. I haven't done it. You know, I would take that a step further, and I see Jeff and I happen to be very involved in our kids' school, and I think Chaim Rutman, by the way, Chaim's in the other room, so if you came to hear Chaim, I apologize, he's not here. And he's also, and I think in the not-for-profit, in the volunteer world, and I look around the room and I see a lot of people that I've worked with on the volunteer level, you know, don't be afraid to mentor people in that as well. The community needs it, and I think that's not somewhere where anyone hires someone to teach them to get involved, but having those conversations and encouraging people to do things, I think, is also a great way to show and learn from mentorship.
Awesome.
Can I just interrupt for a minute?
Yeah, please.
I was thinking, as Howie was saying, that he's one of my mentors, because I was not involved in community, and specifically not with the school, until he wrote me into that position. So Howie would be a mentor on the community involvement work that I've done.
That was my greatest move, by the way. I do say, getting Jeff was my greatest move.
That is awesome. And I think actually it was about what I was about to get into, which is, you know, H3 as an organization, and specifically me when I was starting early on and I was looking to fundraise capital, originally was in the community and eventually from venture capital. And what I noticed was that everyone else you're competing with, they're using an edge. Their edge might be the Harvard Business School network. It might be their edge of the local, you know, church. But one thing I think as Jews that we have is our communities. And our communities are extremely powerful, which is why H3 is such a powerful organization. And then building the networks of advisors, a great place is the Kiddush Club. So Kiddush Club attendance should go sky high, and he charges Howie, I think, $100 a head, right? But it is a powerful network, and you should be leveraging that network to advance yourself in your business. But Jeff, you said something else which was also really interesting, which was no one's going to know your business better than you. And I'm curious if you ever had a time where, again, getting advice is powerful, where you may have spoken to one advisor, got one perspective, and you're like, oh, he's so smart, I should do it. Speak to another advisor, got a different perspective. But then you got to bring that internally, like, okay, does this all make sense for me specifically in my business? And maybe you could talk a little bit.
I like to use this phrase. I think the best business people are the people who play chess and not checkers. What does that mean to me? It means figuring out what the move 3 or 4 steps ahead are, not the move directly in front of you. And the best way to do that for me is to talk to people who have an opposing opinion, or to try and understand what the nature of the game is going to be not what I know or what I can think of, but the things that I can't think of. So I always want a mentor or a coach that's going to challenge me and think differently and talk differently, and not someone, if you're picking a mentor or a business coach or someone around you that's going to just agree with you and tell you what you want to hear so that you feel good at the end of that, I think you got the wrong person in mind. I think you want someone who's going to push you outside of your comfort zone and continue to challenge you and continue to tell you all the things that you don't want to hear. And that's probably the toughest part of finding a mentor and or a business coach, is you got to be prepared to hear the things that you don't want to hear. And that's a really important piece, and that's a challenge, and that's why I think many business coach relationships fail, because as soon as they tell you something about your business that you don't want to hear, you kind of shut down and turn away from that. So I'd encourage everyone who's looking for someone and to find someone and connect with someone who will constantly remind you of the things that you don't know and the things that you're doing incorrectly, because we can all get better.
Yeah, I'll stick with the analogy. You know, if chess is about seeing a few moves down the road, finding someone that has been there is obviously helpful. If all you're getting is the same opinion as you, you're probably not seeing the other side. A lot of what I do on real estate development is negotiating with municipalities. If I don't know what they're going to say, because I can't anticipate what they're thinking, and I don't see their side of it, it's going to be impossible for me to win that negotiation. So having varying opinions is obviously key to success.
Awesome. And I'll actually add that thought process, something at least that I experienced, which is, end of the day, trusting your gut. You could talk to all the advisors in the world and hear the different perspectives, and getting people to, if anything, people that disagree with you is so powerful. But not listening to an advisor, or at least in my experience when I hired someone that came from Walmart, like, oh, this guy must be brilliant. He must know stuff that I don't know. And very often you get advice that could make a lot of sense, but was from their perspective and their experience. You got to take that, you got to filter it, you got to be like, does that make sense for me and my business? And then the day, no one's gonna know that better than yourself. How has technology changed the landscape of finding an advisor, a mentor, in the world where there's so much remote work? You don't have, you're not bumping into people by the coffee room or the water cooler. What is your thoughts of how technology changed that landscape? Is that my turn?
I hate to keep going back to Kiddish Club, but there's no technology and it's in person. It's probably made it better in some ways. I've recently had a few university students, I'm not sure how they got my name, but they're reaching out for a little bit of direction. Some have asked for sort of a Zoom meeting, and I get it, they're out in London or Western or whatever, and some have said, no, I'll drive in and come to meet with you. So I think it's good in that we can have these conversations, but I think if you really do want to get to know someone, technology is more of a barrier than it is a way to help you. Relationships, networking, meeting together, getting together, it's not always the most convenient, but I think, probably, COVID was great in some ways in terms of you can meet with anyone, anytime, anywhere, and no one says, why are you taking this call from the car anymore? But if you are actually trying to speak to someone one-on-one, I don't think you can beat face-to-face.
Got it.
I would agree, but I do think that technology has played a very positive role in the sense of, and it's interesting because I'm looking around the room today and there's 550 people or more here, and I don't know most of them, even though I'm born and raised in Toronto, so this is a bit of an odd comment, but I think sometimes it's challenging to find, we're a tight-knit community, and even if you don't know everybody, we're a very tight-knit community. So sometimes it's hard to find some objective with someone that's local, someone that you can meet face-to-face, that you feel comfortable in talking very openly. Because one of the most important things is being extremely open and vulnerable. And if you're holding back anything, you're not going to get the right advice or the right guidance. So I think technology has allowed for people to find coaches and advisors outside of their direct connection, direct community, and by that allow for an openness and a more potentially safe space when you're finding someone totally outside the box, outside of anything that you do, totally disconnected from the community or any kind of direct connection that gives you the unbiased and ability for them to give you the raw goods without worrying about what they're going to say that's going to offend you or anyone else around you.
Can I add to that real quick? And I think it's important. You mentioned, we are tight knit, and I think, especially in probably almost all businesses, there will be interactions with people from outside the community. If you can find someone that's a mentor that can give you that guidance, it is good. Again, it's knowing who you're dealing with, and I think, it's nice to say we're all the same here and there, but I tend to know certain people's backgrounds will change the way they think, and that will give me an advantage in terms of how I negotiate with them, in terms of what their desired outcomes are. And if all you're doing is getting advice from the people in this room, and there's some great people in this room, it might be sort of only one perspective and doesn't open you up to others. I don't know how you invite the others to Kiddush. I'm not there yet. We'll work on something like that.
Very cool. So you're pushing on the power of that the advice you get, sure, a lot of it from either your business or your community, but there's actually something powerful about going beyond that, beyond your community, beyond your specific business in itself.
I mean, unless you work in a Strymel store, there's a good chance you will need to operate outside the boundaries of our community.
Is that the next career path, though? Is that where you're going after Starlight?
I'm dabbling. I'm thinking of some other options.
Perfect.
Speak to me afterwards if you need a Strymel.
And just to add to this topic, I would say personally, some of my most powerful advisors are actually across the world. One in Israel, one in China, and they would never had the chance to meet them without technology. So definitely face-to-face, community events, super powerful, but looking beyond that, I think is, for me, one of my most powerful advisors came from overseas. What would you say is the most valuable piece of advice and guidance? And maybe any story, I know you used to work with Mr. Bleeman, maybe any stories around that. I think the crowd would love to hear.
Okay, I'm doing it. So I was I can't say enough about the greatness of Mr. Abraham Bleeman. A lot of you know him, and so early on in my career, he came into my office, and I want to make sure this is not taken out of context, but he came in and he said, "When you see a penny on the ground, do you stop to pick it up?" And I hesitated. I was curious. He said, "Because I do." And I want to make it very clear, this was not a lesson in penny pinching as much as a responsibility. And again, I can't say enough about the tremendous mentorship and guidance I got from working with the Bleeman family for so long. But it was a lesson, really be careful with everything. We have a responsibility, and especially in business, if you're not careful, I see my old colleague here, but that made an impact on me on day one, and I think it's really, it's not just the pennies, it's the details, it's knowing everything. You mentioned trusting your instinct and your gut, and I think I saw a lot of great instincts in the entrepreneurial world of Medallion that, where I am now is a bit more corporate, everything modeled it out, and pro formas and all this other, and there's ups and downs to both. You can trust your instinct if you have as much information as possible. And something I'll say about Nathan Bleeman was, we're not making a decision. We don't have to sit here and analyze it for 6 years, but make sure you have as much information as possible before you make that decision. You can trust your gut, but you've got to have the information.
Love that. Okay.
I think the answer to that question is be true to who you are, no matter where you find yourself. And I guess, as I'm thinking through the mentorship, two kind of mentors that pop into my mind, my dad, in the short time that I was able to watch him in business, was able to play in multiple different worlds because he stayed true to who he was and was devout in his beliefs and attracted people from across the board because of that. And I guess specifically in the sports industry, a gentleman by the name of Shlomi Werdiger, who's very involved with the Aguda, who owns a company called Outer Stuff. Many of you may know him. It's a massive company in the youth sports licensing business, and that's a gentleman who is sitting in the box next to the commissioner of the NFL at the Super Bowl and is connected to every major player in the sports industry, but is constantly wearing the same garb and acting in the same way all the time. And I think that when I look at mentorship, being true to who you are at all points in time, being real and being honest, is probably the best way to attract people and to find the right mentor. So that's one of the takeaways that I have.
Awesome. All right, I guess we'll go to questions in a minute. But before we jump into questions, any last piece of advice, any key takeaways that you would end off with to the crowd?
I think we talked a lot about most of those lessons as we waded through the path of answering the questions. I guess the answer is I got roped into doing this because I wanted to find mentors or connect with people and become a mentor. So if anybody, we talked about finding the right path, but definitely open to having discussions and guiding people and working with people. And I think if we all approach it for the betterment of the community, that's the best takeaway or lesson that I've learned so far in being here today.
They don't need to come to the Kiddush Club, is what you're saying. Howie?
You definitely.
How about you?
You definitely need to make sure there's tequila at your Kiddush Club. That's the takeaway.
I did learn that from you, so thank you, Jeff. I guess it's be open to learning from everyone. I think going back to the beginning, but I think also be mindful. I don't want this to sound like Musser, but I guess people are learning from us, right? Like we're out there with our kippas on, and people see who we are and what we do. So I guess be mindful of formal, informal, unintended mentorship, unintended messages that you're sending to people. It's probably just a good idea to keep that in mind at all times.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions for Jeff or Howie?
One book that comes to mind that you've read, Jewish, not Jewish, related to mentoring, business, something that speaks to you, something that you maybe read 2 times, purchased it for others as a gift because you believe in it, putting you on the spot.
All right, this is going to be an odd answer, but I'm going to suggest the Bible or the Chumash, and specifically Bereshit, because I find that if you look at the lessons taught by the forefathers, I guess, I find some serious mentorship in the way they conducted themselves and the way they kind of waded through life and the principles that you can find at the very basic introductory stories to the Chumash. So I know that may be a boring answer because I'm sure you're looking for what great book can I go out and read, but just look at the fundamental principles of the initial stories of Bereshit, and I think we can find a lot of mentorship from the original founding fathers.
They're going to ask you to speak in the morning part next year.
I'm angling for Rabbi Miller's spot next year to answer the halachic shaila, so that's why I'm going in that direction. But
So I would say the book is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which my mentor recommended to me and is something that I've purchased as gifts for the people that report into me. Just a good strategic way of thinking about things. The Art of War by Sun Tzu. TZU.
I'm going to add one more, Sports Illustrated. If you want to find out really what not to do, just read Sports Illustrated, watch the athletes, and mentor how not to behave.
And now you're not speaking in the morning next year. Well done. You got yourself off.
Perfect.
I'm actually going to add also 2 books to this list. And I think it ties to mentorship because mentorship usually looking for people that made mistakes before you. And no matter how many times you talk to someone and get advice, you're going to make your own mistakes. So there's 2 books. One is The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and another one called Shoe Dogs. Shoe Dogs is a story of Phil Knight, founder of Nike. And I think, and The Hard Things About Hard Things is the same bucket, which is, you could sometimes think Nike is the most successful, perfect company that ever existed in the history of the world. But really, practically, they almost went bankrupt 10 times. And that book, you're like, oh my gosh, Phil Knight, Nike almost went bankrupt 10 times. That's a crazy thing to say. So I think it's almost a therapy book to realize that during the journey of whatever journey you may be on, if it's business or it's corporate, it's going to be crazy, but that's actually just part of the journey. So I would add those 2 as great ones. Any other questions?
So thank you so much, Howard and Jeff, and Izzy for moderating this very interesting panel. I wanted to touch on that piece of kind of viewing business and life in a more chess rather than checkers way, and doing the next steps. So I guess in chess, it'll be more guessing the next steps of the opponent and how to respond to that with its competitors. What if the opponent in your business is your short-sighted or narrowed viewed sight into the future? So you have a plan for the future of the business, you're overtaken by short-term events or goals or deals that you have to close that may be important and play into that part, but you have to keep the long-term goal in the back of your head. So how do you deal with the short-term successes or failures as opposed to having those?
What doesn't kill you make you stronger. I'm pretty sure that's a song by somebody. But I think that the failures and the challenges are as important as the successes and the wins. And it's the learning experience from each one of those that makes you bigger and better. So despite the fact that, and being nimble and being able to change that plan. So, oftentimes in a chess game, you think you know what your opponent's going to do, so you make your move. If they do something different, what are you about to do? You got to be able to pivot quickly. You got to be able to roll with the punches. And obviously, sometimes that's planned, and sometimes it's totally not planned. COVID hit, we were in a sports business, supplying lettering and numbering to stadiums. COVID comes up, there are no sports left anymore. An entire business, and I'm sure many people in the crowd have a similar experience, but what are you supposed to do? How do you carry on business? And that's why, fortunately, credit to my business partner, because my idea would have been get rid of everybody, keep 2 people around, throw in the keys, and lock the door, and good luck. His creativity, ingenuity, or chutzpah to not say no suggested, let's pivot, start making PPE, gowns, masks, and other things, and that's kind of the way we survived that roller coaster. But I think you got to be prepared to pivot quickly and use each challenge as an opportunity to learn and get better.
I think just to add, it's not I know it's cliche, but it's only a mistake if you don't learn from it, would be the first piece. And then if your opponent's doing, if you know who your opponent is, and sometimes you're up against someone that's either stupid or short-sighted, maybe stupid a bad word, or they're after something that they
without a lot of chachma, I think.
Yes. But no, again, back to knowing your opponent. If I know what that other person's going to do, or even if I know they're dishonest, then at least I know that up front. But that's why I think don't go into that battlefield without knowing your opponent, and that's the art of war talks a lot about that.
You mentioned picking up the penny from the floor. Do you see your success coming from delivering something powerfully to the world and making money as a byproduct, or do you see focusing on profitability is what drove your success?
Is that me?
You're the penny from the floor guy.
I really I got into real estate development because of a summer job and sort of seeing the opportunity to create value or build something that wasn't there before, right? So I was doing my MBA, and you could be a management consultant where I'm telling other people what to do, or an investment banker where I'm making money because I'm selling shares in what you do. I really got into it and sort of fell in love with what I did, and I don't know that I thought about the profitability. And I don't want to give advice. That's probably not the best way to run every business, which is forget the profitability. But I really believe in what I do, and so that kind of drives me. I don't own the business. It seems like the stuff I've done has made the owners profitable, so fortunately it's gone the right way. But I guess if it was, I don't think about the projects that I'm doing as, I think of them as building new rental developments. I don't think about them as the dollars and cents. And I guess the discipline of where I am now is thinking about those dollars and cents from day one. And I guess long-term vision. This is a deeper conversation, I guess, but yeah, I really thought about what is that I'm doing, not when am I going to get the paycheck for it.
I think I have time for one more question, if there is any.
Can you share a big failure of yours and a lesson that you learned from it?
Me? In all my life? I'll go first, only because it's maybe a funny story. We had a pile of dirt that we had to get off of a site, and an excavator came and said, we negotiated a price to remove it off site, and every once in a while people do need fill for their subdivisions, not usually, but I was like, look at this, I found money, this guy's paying me to take the fill, we're gonna get 60 grand, this is great. We get to the end of it, we meet on site, it's all gone, and I say, okay, should I send you an invoice? You just want to send me a check? He's like, wait, what? No, what? He thought I was paying him, and I thought he was paying me, to the point where it actually went to court, and the judge said, I've never seen anything like this. I have reason to believe he knew he was lying, which I won't get into. but I was never allowed to write up my own contracts at Medallion anymore.
Mine was the very first lesson I ever learned in business. It was day 3 after we incorporated the new business and we hired the first 4 employees. And it's Friday afternoon, and the floor manager comes into the office, knocks on the door, and says, "Okay, it's payday. Where's the paycheck?" And there was money in the account, but physically I didn't have checks yet. So being naive and being 21, I said, "No problem. I'll bring you the check on Monday. I'll get it over the weekend. I'll bring you the check on Monday. No problem." Great. She walks out, and the office happened to be parallel to the street, and I hear rustling outside the windows. I'm like, okay, that's weird. It's 4:30. Usually Barney Rubble would have these people in their car and halfway home. And this very angry lady marches back into the office, looks me dead in the eye, and says, "If we don't get our paycheck right now, you're not going to have anyone here to pay on Monday." So here I am, 21 years old, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking at this business partner, and I'm like, okay, now what? Like, we just don't physically have business checks. And he looked at me and said, "Well, we got to get the people paid." So I took out my personal checkbook, wrote 4 checks, and realized 2 things in life: never miss a payday or taxes, and other than that, you should survive. So that was a very good lesson that I learned right out of the gate, and I, in 18 years, never missed another payday, and maybe late on a couple of tax payments, but never missed a tax payment.
It doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. The last thing before we wrap up, I think we're at the end. You said something interesting about chutzpah. You mentioned the word chutzpah. And I think when you're looking to build the key advisors for yourself, you should have chutzpah. You should reach out to as many people as you can. It's all about getting the face-to-face, getting the meeting. Most won't work out, but absolutely have chutzpah, cold email, call, or go to LinkedIn and do what you need to do to get the right advisors for yourself. So Jeff, always happy to talk to people right now. Howie joined the Kiddush Club. He's happy to talk to you. But thank you, Howie. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it.